Hi there. I'm Professor Eric Steinhardt, and let's talk about philosophy and cannabis, right? So, the questions about cannabis, questions about its legalization and its ethical use, are very timely topics, right? Including elections that are happening either very soon or in the future, right? Questions about whether or not cannabis should be approved for general adult use in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, other similar states around us in our area, Pennsylvania, right? These questions have been on voters' minds and on the minds of legislators. So we should talk about the philosophical issues of cannabis use. And of course, cannabis is the more appropriate name for marijuana. There's lots of slang, weed, ganja, these kinds of things, but we're going to call it cannabis. And that's a scientific reference to the plant and to what it accurately is. So, one of the questions philosophically is why do people take this plant? What do they use it for? Right now, cannabis, the plant, right, we have to distinguish right away between cannabis, the plant, and the active chemicals or molecules in the plant that affect human animals like us, right? So there are lots of chemicals in the cannabis plant. Two of the most sort of popular, or the ones that are most marketed or debated, are CBD and THC. They're related, they're similar, but they have different effects, right? They have different effects on receptors in the human body, the endocannabinoid receptors. There's a CB1 receptor, a CB2 receptor. There's, probably a half dozen other cannabinoid receptors. So the cannabinoids are the physiologically active molecules or chemicals in the cannabis plant. And there are lots of cannabinoids that are active. There seem to be dozens of them that affect dozens of different receptors in the human body. So it's not just CBD and THC. Now, CBD is generally legal in almost every state in the United States. It's legal at the federal level. I think there are just a few states that ban it, but the laws change rapidly in this area. So, generally speaking, CBD you can just go and buy pretty much anywhere. Of course, you have to have questions about whether it's purity and quality, but it's a legal substance. Other cannabinoids are generally not much marketed. There's some marketing of CBN, I think, and maybe a few others. But the one that's more controversial is THC, right? Tetrahydrocannabinol. And that's the one that, gets you high. Right? CBD actually does have psychoactive effects. It tends to make people less anxious. It tends to help relax people. It probably has a lot of medical applications. CBD seems to be useful as a treatment for this or that. But the question on people's minds is usually THC or just cannabis itself, right? Because if you get some flower, right, that's the flowering parts of the cannabis plant that have the psychoactive chemicals. If you get some cannabis flower and you grind it up and you smoke it, or you have some oil from it and you vape it, or have edibles that are made from the plant, then you're getting all these chemicals. You're getting CBD, you're getting THC, CBN, and all the dozens of other terpenes and other physiologically active molecules from the plant. So, in many cases, it's a question about the plant, right? So, if cannabis ends up being legalized in New Jersey, then you would be legally able to go to a cannabis store, a dispensary, buy some flower, go home and smoke it, and you would get the whole range of chemicals in the plant. So now we have a lot of philosophical questions, right? The main one is why do people use this plant? What are people using this plant for? And it's really not accurate or it's really not adequate to say, well, they use it to get high, right? Because what is high? What is getting high? What does that mean? Yeah, I mean, like if I smoke cannabis, does that mean suddenly I'm going to be up on the roof? I'm going to be higher. I'm sitting in, I'm sitting in the ground floor of my house. But if I smoke marijuana, I'll have this urge to climb the stairs and go up in the attic. So now I'm higher. I'm high. That doesn't make sense. This is some strange metaphor of this vertical axis of height, right? I guess now, I mean, if I smoke marijuana to get high, does that mean right now I'm low? Is low mean something about like low mood, like I'm depressed? Does that mean that when I get high, I'm manic and I'm not depressed? So this is really vague, right? And it's just not accurate. We got to look at the actual effects of these molecules and the effects of the plant. What's clear is that humans are really into cannabis. They have been for thousands of years. It seems the best evidence shows that cannabis is among the oldest humanly cultivated plants. It might be the oldest humanly cultivated plant. Of course, cannabis, the plant, is also useful, it's right, called hemp. It's useful for rope. Its seeds make an oil that's not psychoactive, that's useful for cooking. And the seeds themselves could be ground up and eaten. So, hemp as the cannabis plant that's not really psychoactive has lots of uses by humans that aren't really relevant to debates about cannabis as a psychoactive substance. So, why do people take it? Right? And the getting high category is sort of a category of intoxication. It's not really well defined as to what that is. But people do say they take it to get high, they take it to have a certain type of intoxication. But you'd have to really ask, what is that intoxication doing? And somebody might say, well, it makes people feel good, pleasurable, right? They giggle, they laugh at things and they relax. But on the other hand, some people have the negative reactions to cannabis. They get anxious, they get paranoid, they get, or they eat too much, right? It dysregulates their bodies. So it's not necessarily that it's all fun and games with this stuff. So, or, fun and giggles with this stuff. So, intoxication, usually when people have taken intoxicating substances, the substances are doing other things for their bodies. And the intoxication makes them want to take it, or they take it for that reason. This really becomes unclear, right? But intoxication is a category of use. It's a vague category. One of the interesting things about it is people who take it for intoxication often aren't concerned about their dose, right? They just take a lot of it. Smoke a whole bag of weed. Yeah, I got high. Wow. That's not very precise. A more precise use is religious, right? And this is also very interesting that people use cannabis. They have for a long time used cannabis for religious purposes, right? So in India, the sadhus, right, the followers or worshippers of the god Shiva, they use cannabis religiously. And maybe they use it to help with meditation. Maybe they use it to help their bodies ward off cold or hunger or pain, right? But they use it, they claim it helps them to commune with Shiva, to channel Shiva in their own bodies. And they believe that Shiva is present in the cannabis smoke. And when they smoke cannabis, they are taking the Shiva power into their own bodies. It's kind of like Christian communion. Which brings us to the Rastafarians, right? The Rastafarians are a kind of Christian, kind of Jewish, kind of African sect that were actually influenced by the sadhus very much because the British Empire brought lots of sadhus from India over to Jamaica. Right, when the British Empire controlled both India and Jamaica, and Jamaicans mingled with the Hindu sadhus and learned about marijuana and picked up a lot of ideas, right? So dreadlocks that we associate with Rastafarians actually come from Hindu sadhus. And the word ganja, right, used often by Rastafarians to refer to marijuana, it's a Hindi word. So we have this religious use also today in the United States, right? There are lots of religious groups based around cannabis. The Elevationists in Colorado. And somebody might say, oh, well, you guys just smoke weed to get high. Ha ha ha. And the Elevationists say, what are you talking about, man? Weed is legal in Colorado. We can go down to the store and buy weed and get high anytime we want, right? We don't need an excuse to get high. It's legal. We can just go do it. We use marijuana in religious ceremonies and rituals, and this is religious. It has something to do with communion with holiness. Now that's very weird. I mean, there aren't many plants that people use religiously. There's ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, okay, things like that, other hallucinogenic mushrooms. But cannabis has been used around the globe for religious purposes. in shamanism, in Hinduism, in Rastafarianism, in contemporary American elevationism or Kantheism. What are people doing? Does cannabis really bring them closer to Shiva or to God? Rastafarians, like the Shivites, right, like the Sadhus, they think that cannabis smoke contains the Holy Spirit. And this is Christian communion for them. They don't think communion, oh, you eat some bread and drink some wine. Communion is taking the holy smoke. They think that cannabis is a holy plant with God's presence inside it. And by consuming this plant, which God wants them to do, right, they commune with God. Is this true, or have these guys kind of just like, could you just say, look, well, you guys are just on drugs? I mean, you messed up your minds, you took these drugs that alter your consciousness in crazy ways, and now you go off and make this, messed up theology that's just wrong. Right? So this now becomes a religious debate. Right? Another use of cannabis, a third use, we had the intoxication religious, is going to be artistic. Right? Artists have used cannabis to help them make better art, particularly musicians, right? Jazz musicians were heavily influenced by cannabis. A lot of rock and roll heavily influenced by cannabis. And painting and poetry influenced by cannabis. This use seems fairly modern, even though cannabis has been around for a long, long time, right? The notion that it's connected with art is pretty modern. But the question is, right, artists, what's it doing? And artists often say, well, it helps them become more intensely artistically aware. It enhances their creativity. It makes available to them a greater range of artistic possibilities. It gives them greater artistic awareness. It's revelatory. It reveals greater artistic potentials to them. It reveals greater beauty to them. They see or hear things that they wouldn't have seen or heard before. So this is interesting in a lot of senses. Artists are often concerned with dosage, right? One of the things that we look at when we think about cannabis, it's a substance that affects your body. What's the dose? How much are you getting? Intoxication and religious uses generally don't care about dose. Take as much as you want. Artists say, look, if you get too high to play your instrument, musicians, right? You get too high to play your instrument. That's abuse. That's drug abuse, right? You should take just enough cannabis to help you be a better artist, to enhance your artistic performance. But if you take too much and you're just a stoner and you can't practice, you can't rehearse, you can't play your instrument, you just pick up your brushes and throw some paint on the canvas and you can't paint worth shit, that's drug abuse. That's taking too much. So artists are concerned about dosage. And this will take us to a fourth use category, which is medical, right? In medical uses, in fact, these are the oldest recorded uses of cannabis, is for medicine. Cannabis is recorded thousands of years back for use in pain, particularly joint pain. It's recorded as being used for migraine headaches. It's recorded as being used to treat pain in cancer. And other types of pain. And these uses go back to the ancient Chinese medicine, ancient Indian, Hindu medicine, Ayurvedic medicine. Arabs, right, knew about the use of cannabis for pain and for migraine and for other medical conditions. And it enters European medicine too. The ancient Greeks knew about using cannabis for pain conditions and other medical conditions. And in fact, the American Medical Association, right before cannabis was made illegal, recommended cannabis for all sorts of medical conditions. So medical cannabis is legal in many, many states in the United States, and it's widely recognized as having lots of medicinal properties. But when you think about its medical uses, you get into the questions of dosage. Dosage has to be very precise. And also the questions of which molecules, right? Maybe THC makes schizophrenia worse, but CBD makes schizophrenia better, can help cure schizophrenia. So now you're looking at very precise drugs, right, in the medical sense. What exact molecule are you taking? What exact effects does it have on the nervous system or the digestive system? What does it do? That's another category. Two other categories are going to be wellness, right? So maybe cannabis can help make you not just cure disease, but make you healthy in a sense of being better than just disease free, right? Being just disease free is a kind of neutral kind of way of being healthy. But wellness is supposed to be better than just being disease free or better than just being, not having pain. Wellness is supposed to be an enhanced state of biological flourishing and life. And lots of people argue that cannabis can help you with wellness. So there's often a debate in cannabis communities, right? When cannabis became legal in California and Colorado, people actually started looking down on the stoners, the intoxication users, and said that's abuse, right? If you're just using cannabis to get high, get wasted, get stoned, that's drug abuse. If you're using it to flourish, to enhance your life, that's good. That's ethically regulated because now you're concerned about dosage. And this gets us to the deep ethical questions. Even if cannabis becomes legal, say in New Jersey, there's still going to be an ethical question of how much should you take and why should you take it, right? And what are you taking it for? So wellness advocates say, like, yeah, if you take so much cannabis that you can't function, you get couch lock, or you just want to eat corn chips and lay on the couch and play video games, you're not a productive citizen, you're not living a good life. That's drug abuse. That's not helping you. That's not ethical, right? But they say that cannabis can be used for wellness. It can be used to help you flourish at a higher level, right? It can help make you a virtuous human. It can help make you a more enlightened human. And that's wellness. And there again, dosage is going to be really key. And finally, one use is spiritual, maybe a little different than the religious. Maybe it's similar to religious and maybe similar to wellness as well. That cannabis is associated sometimes with practices like Buddhist meditation or with yoga. Right, so taking some cannabis to do a spiritual practice, and the cannabis can help relax you, it can help you focus, and again, the spiritual uses are going to be very concerned with dosage and with intent or purpose, right? These are the ethical questions, right? You start with some intent and a purpose, and your intention and purpose shapes your dosage, right? If you smoke so much weed that you can't hold your yoga poses, then somebody who's trying to use it for yoga spirituality is going to say that's drug abuse, right? You took too much. You just wasted. You can't do yoga. You can't meditate. That's abusing the drug, right? If you take just enough that it helps you relax, it helps you focus on your yoga poses, helps you become more attuned to the spiritual meanings of yoga, helps you become more focused in your meditation practices so that you are oriented towards trying to be a better person, ethical self transformation, that's ethically good, right? But there again, dosage and intention are key. So these are six uses of cannabis. If you look at how people talk about using it, they talk about using it for intoxication, for religion, for art, for medicine, for wellness, and for spirituality. These uses have some overlap, they're not always different, but key questions are going to be intention and purpose, right? Ethical regulation by a higher goal, right? In art, right? In religion, art, medicine, wellness, and spirituality, there's always a higher ethical ideal that regulates the use of the cannabis, right? So for the religious person, it's going to be some religious ideal. For the artist, an artistic ideal. For medicine, it's the ideal of health and bodily flourishing. Again, for wellness, it's going to be the issue of a higher kind of bodily flourishing, flourishing of the body, mind, and spirit. And for spirituality, again, it will be a kind of ethical ideal of becoming an enlightened or highly flourishing human being. So, those are some thoughts about cannabis. There's some great stuff I've got for you to read. Thank you very much. I'm Professor Eric Steinhardt.